Okay, muscles again, but we're switching gears. This material about muscles does not correlate with your lab. It is in preparation for physiology. So this is more microscopic muscle structures. And you absolutely have to have a solid foundation of this stuff in order to do well in physiology, because we kind of start by assuming that you understand all of this. Before we get into the real microscopic parts of muscles, let's just talk generally about what muscles, excuse me, do. Well, at the microscopic level. So, all muscle tissue, and remember, these are the 3 types of muscle tissues, and you did locations, cell lengths, how they work, and all of that stuff, and you did all of that back in the histology chapter. You're responsible for that material again, so make sure that you brush off that table that was in your histology chapter about muscle. But let's talk about muscle tissue, all 3 types of muscle tissue, and then we'll sort of narrow in on skeletal muscle, and then we'll go back to the other 2. All muscle tissue is what's called excitable. It's got the characteristic of excitability, meaning that it can respond to an electrical stimulus. And how does it respond to an electrical stimulus? Generally with contractility. Muscle is, the 3 types of muscle are the tissues that can shorten upon stimulation. What it's really doing is taking ATP, which is chemical energy, and converting it into mechanical energy or kinetic energy of movement. FYI, that is really inefficient. All energy conversions are inefficient, so there tends to be a lot of heat released as a byproduct. Muscle is also extensible, meaning that we'll see it has a whole lot of connective tissue within it, and you can stretch it to give it more range of motion. But it will return back to its original state because it's got some degree of elasticity, meaning that no matter how much I stretched my bicep, if I am otherwise healthy, it's not going to become flaccid just because of the stretching. Okay, so what does muscle tissue do? Well, you know some of the stuff that it does, but some of the stuff may be a little less intuitive. It does function in motion, of course. Muscle primarily pulls on bones to move you around, but then facial muscles pull on skin. Muscle doesn't just move you, though, because it's also responsible for postural stability. So sitting in front of you, I couldn't be doing unless I had contraction of the muscles in my neck and my back, my abdomen. Muscle is responsible for stabilizing joints. So if you span a joint with especially a relatively strong muscle, it's going to make that joint more stable. Like I said before, because the conversion of energy is really inefficient, you tend to produce heat as a byproduct of muscle contraction. And in some places, muscle is more about support than it is about wiggling things around, like what we call the pubococcygeal muscles, the muscles that are in your pelvic floor. They're responsible for holding your junk in there, among other things. And then sphincters especially are responsible for guarding openings. And then muscle contraction keeps blood and fluids moving in your body because of the muscle that's inside the wall of the vessel. And also, if you squish on a vessel, it'll move things through the vessel, even if you squish on it from the outside. Okay, so let's start getting into the organization of a skeletal muscle as we move in. So there are a bunch of figures in your textbook for this. And so what I want to do is I want to look at a skeletal muscle. I can't tell what that's meant to be. Maybe one of the biceps heads. First off, whenever you run into muscles, it's important to know that these prefixes and suffixes, or these prefixes, I should say, myo, and then I guess that's a suffix, mys, those mean muscle, not surprising. But then when you start running into the microscopic muscle structures, they use a different prefix, which is sarco, which means flesh. It's usually used to refer to microscopic stuff. So like big stuff tends to have the my ones, and smaller stuff tends to have the sarco. The other thing I want to remind you of is that when we are talking about muscle, the term muscle fiber is interchangeable with the term muscle cell. And that matters because, of course, we used fiber entirely differently when we were talking about, for instance, connective tissue. So when I say muscle fiber, I mean muscle cell and vice versa. Okay? So let us talk about the coatings around a skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle is, of course, made primarily of skeletal muscle tissue, but there is connective tissue associated with it. And what we have to do with this figure is kind of understand how the connective tissue is associated with it. So the skeletal muscle fibers are all held together by connective tissue. The whole skeletal muscle is wrapped in connective tissue that's going all the way around the whole muscle, and that's called the epimysium. And epi means, of course, on or upon. Trying to get my mouse to work again. Okay, so epimysium here, on or upon, and it wraps around the entire thing. Now, the epimysium ends up holding the muscle together, but the epimysium is continuous with the tendon, and then the tendon is continuous with the periosteum of the bone. So this is a really strong association. So what kind of tissue is epimysium made of? Well, what kind of tissue would you use to wrap around the outside of something that's going to have a whole bunch of stress in a bunch of different directions? It is dense irregular connective tissue. So dense irregular connective tissue wraps around the whole outside of a muscle. And then all you have to do is weave the collagen fibers from the dense irregular connective tissue into the collagen fibers of the tendon, which is made of dense regular connective tissue. And then that will weave into the collagen fibers of the periosteum, which is made of dense irregular connective tissue again. So basically, all of these are kind of like a continuous fabric, so it's really hard to pull them apart from one another, which ends up being really important. Okay, so then this is what's kind of hard to follow. So let me draw it in here for you. So, all right, so the epimysium wraps all the way around the whole blasted thing, right? Whole thing. But then all you do is you take that same continuous piece and you start to thin it out a little bit, and then it wraps around these smaller structures. Okay, so the epimysium is on the outside right here. But then once you get in a little further, a thinner version that is continuous is called the perimysium. And what the perimysium does is it penetrates into the muscle and it divides it into these bundles of muscle fibers called fascicles. So here is a fascicle here, right, that's wrapped with perimysium. And then here they pulled out the whole fascicle. This whole thing that you're seeing right here is the whole fascicle. So epi on the outside. Then the epi gets thinner and it goes toward the inside and wraps around and sort of creates the boundary around fascicles. When it's on the inside right here, it's perimysium. And then one more time, what we can do, is now we take the perimysium that we did before, and we wrap from the perimysium, we wrap it around each individual cell, and that is endomysium. So basically, let me sort of draw it one more time for you, and draw it as it's going all the way around the outside. It's epimysium, right? But then I'm going to fold it in, and it's going to wrap around here, and then it's going to be perimysium. But then I'm going to fold it around here and wrap it around an individual cell, and then it's endomysium. So the endomysium wraps around individual muscle fibers or muscle cells. And the epi, the peri, and the endo are all continuous with one another. And then, like I said, once you get out to the epi will then be continuous with the tendon, which will then weave into the periosteum of the bone. So this makes a really, really strong association with skeletal muscle, so that it's really unlikely to get blown apart, even in someone who's got big, beastly muscles that can take a lot of tension. Okay, last thing on this little video is just how do you speak to skeletal muscle with the nervous system? With the skeletal muscle, so one thing, the skeletal muscle is really energetically expensive, and every single cell needs to be told what to do by the nervous system. So generally what happens is along the length, somewhere along the belly of the muscle, you are going to have an artery going in and a vein going out. And then what it's going to have to do is it's going to have to split into smaller arteries and arterioles. And then it's going to have to burrow deep into all of these little, do you see these little blood vessels in there? Burrow deep into the muscle so that you can get oxygen and nutrients to all of those individual muscle fibers. Okay, so each individual muscle fiber, by the time you get down to, and this is a whole muscle fiber, so this is a fiber pulled out, and this is a whole muscle fiber. Every single muscle fiber has a snuggle of capillaries around it. It's like it's got a little sweater on of capillaries. So skeletal muscle is really, really vascular. That's part of the reason that the tissue looks red. When you are eating a steak, you are eating a cross-section of a cow muscle, and it looks red for this reason, among one other. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Okay. The other thing, every single skeletal muscle fiber, every single one of these muscle fibers, and there's, I don't know, hundreds of them in that particular muscle and thousands of them in some muscles. Every single one of these muscle fibers must be told what to do. So here's a muscle fiber, here's a muscle fiber. If you do not speak to an individual muscle fiber with the nervous system, it will never do anything. So there are no gap junctions, so they don't give each other messages. So you have to talk to every single one. So you have to talk to every single one at what we call a neuromuscular junction. Now, you guys don't learn a ton of detail about neuromuscular junctions and anatomy, but it is basically this region right here, where the nervous system talks to the muscular system. The way it talks, by the way, you learn in phys, but basically it's with neurotransmitters, and it makes some electrical changes on the cell and all that good stuff. So it has to talk to every single one. So what we have in this picture is 1, 2, 3 muscle fibers, okay, 3 muscle fibers. Here is 1 neuron. So what I'm telling you is if this part right here gets damaged, if you damage that particular axon, then this one over here is paralyzed until it repairs. If you damage this whole thing right here, all 3 of them are paralyzed. So every single muscle fiber must be told what to do by the nervous system. Every single muscle fiber. So not only is muscle highly, highly vascular because it's got really high energy needs, it's also highly innervated. So highly, highly innervated. A skeletal muscle fiber will only contract when directly commanded by the nervous system in a healthy person. Okay, and we'll stop there for this one.